Hello everyone, welcome to the power session. Now, I want you to imagine that you have been given the secrets to success. You've been given the information that seemingly other people didn't have to be able to amass huge amounts of wealth, tremendous amounts of influence, to be able to change the course of your life and millions of others' lives from these incredible instructions, from these secrets and these principles. I want you to imagine that you finally track down the source of these things and were offered the opportunity to receive them, to then implement them into your life. I want you to think about this scenario seriously, as if you had received what you had always been looking for. What were you missing? What was it that allowed you to get so close but never totally there? What was it that allowed your mind to always be so much further ahead than your current reality could actually produce? And now you had received them. You had received these 10 scrolls. You had received these 10 carefully honed and finely tuned leather scrolls built to instruct you to amass great wealth, to amass incredible influence, and to be able to change the world for good because of their influence, because of their instructions. How would you respond if you had been searching for a way to do this, as many of us as entrepreneurs and business leaders have been searching for what can get us to the next level, what can really create fulfillment and success, not just monetarily, but yes, monetarily, as well as with our families and our relationships, in the peace that we want to have before we go to bed, unassisted by anything to help us sleep soundly and to live patiently. That kind of success. How would you respond if that was given to you? Well, my name is Paul Blanchard. I'm the president of Habit Finder and the Og Mandino companies. Habit Finder is the official Og Mandino company, the flagship, as we teach the principles that Og introduced us to 50 years ago, as well as honed them and brought them into the 21st century using incredible technology and mathematics and science to be able to measure what Og taught us we were a slave to, that we can never break free from, and that is our habits. That our habits and our actions and our habits and our emotions and our habits and our thoughts have set out a path in our lives. As Og said, our past deeds have set out a path that threatens to imprison our future because of those habits. Now, he introduced this to us over 50 years ago with one of the greatest books ever written, The Greatest Salesman in the World. Those of you who have read it, those of you who have digested it, know the power that is contained in that incredible book. Now, Og sold over 50 million copies. We had the opportunity to acquire the film rights to The Greatest Salesman in the World 20 years ago, almost exactly 20 years ago, coming up in January. And acquiring the film rights first led to, well, there's way more here than just a film. And then asking Betty, Og's widow, who's on our board of directors, if we could create an entire company around this. And that led to going back to the scrolls and his other writing and creating a technology that is now referred to as the Habit Finder that allows us to measure your habits in the deepest way possible, your habits of thinking. But all of this started. Now, we've worked with 250,000 plus clients, entrepreneurs, Fortune 500 companies, Global 100 companies, and everything in between. Because when you can get to where we really live, the source of our reality, which is the way we think, that's what produces and influences everything else. The decisions we make, the emotions we feel, the actions we take, and ultimately the results we create. However, this all started back with a story over 50 years ago about a camel boy named Hafid. Now, there are amazing things to learn from this book, from The Greatest Salesman in the World. There are incredible principles here when you get to the heart of the book, the middle of the book, where Hafid, this camel boy, actually reads the 10 scrolls. So you're reading them right here in the book. It's incredible. And to think about the fact that Og wrote the story first. So he's got the beginning of the story, the end of the story, and has this gap in the middle of the book where he's now going to write the secrets of success. What allowed, in the beginning of the book, Pathros to become the greatest salesman in the world, thus the title. What was it that put him so far ahead of anyone else at that time? Hafid wanted to know. He knew if he was going to be the best, which he had hardly anything, as a camel boy, that he would want to learn from the best. And so he went and found out that it wasn't necessarily Pathros. It was Pathros's application of the 10 scrolls that allowed him to be the wealthiest, most successful salesman in the world. And through a couple happenstances, spoiler alert, you've had 50 years to be able to read this, Hafid ends up doing some things that create a sign that he should be the next one to receive these scrolls. Now, those of you who have read it know this story, okay? And dive right into the scrolls and hopefully read them on a regular basis. They are some of the most powerful writing for creating what neuroscientists would call density focus, creating a way to actually change the way you learn, to change the way your thoughts function on not just a philosophical level, but what's behind all that is the biology of your brain. And that's why when Pathros went to give the scrolls to Hafid, he said the first one is the secret to learning, the secret to actually changing your thinking habits, which is what Habit Finder has dedicated its entire resources and technologies and teaching and coaching that we do, is to expound upon the secrets to learning, the secrets to actually changing your thinking habits and being aware of which ones they are. And then the next 9 scrolls, as Pathros says, are the secrets and the principles to great success, the greatest success in any industry, in all ventures, as it goes on to say. But what I want to talk about first today in our power session is a little bit about what would happen if you were given these 10 scrolls. Because a lot of people read the book and dive right into the 10 scrolls, which Og Mandino wrote in one night. Just crazy that he wrote these incredible words that have been validated in science and medicine and how the brain works. Even some things we didn't know about until the last 10, 15 years that Og was writing about poetically in this book over 50 years ago. Unbelievable, that alone. But sometimes we skip over what happened right before the scrolls in the book. And it just happens to be one of my favorite parts because it's a powerful lesson in humanity, which is a critical part. If we try to create success at the denial of our humanity, we'll never be able to enjoy it. We'll never be able to find fulfillment. We'll never be able to find joy in the journey. We'll be stuck in that consumer pattern of continually trying to get joy from the journey rather than joy in the journey, which means intrinsic, which is us as human beings, within us, to be able to find joy there, so that when we do that, we can apply joy and fulfillment and success to any journey. When you have to get joy from the journey, then it depends on the journey. But if you can learn the secrets of finding joy in the journey, then it doesn't matter what journey you're on, which we'll get to that principle in just a second. But I want to take you back. And for those of you who haven't read it, it's 108 pages, okay? I would get through it this weekend. Listen to it on Audible, whatever you can do. Get through The Greatest Salesman in the World. It's the foundation of what we've been able to build on top of that, the Habit Finder coaching program and the Habit Finder technology, the profile, that has allowed us to be able to make some of the most significant shifts in human progress and in personal development out there, to be able to move beyond the restraints of just behavioral development and emotional development to actually get to the source of thinking. Now here's Hafid, this camel boy, who's just given this cedar chest with these leather scrolls in it that's all Pathros used to be able to create the largest accumulation of wealth in the world at that time. And you'd think Hafid would be pretty pumped. Just like you might think you'd be pretty excited, okay, joining the Habit Finder coaching program, jumping into masterminds and working on you. You'd think that as you started to receive correct principles, true principles to be able to succeed, that you couldn't be more excited about it. And many people are, depending on the event and how it's constructed. But we might dive into a little bit in terms of the validity and the way it's being fed to you, because here is Hafid, who is carefully given the wisdom of the ages, and we forget how he first responded. So he gets into his room at an inn after having left Pathros and been given the 10 scrolls, and Pathros said, take them with you and apply them in any way you see fit to find great success beyond here. And it says that Hafid placed the small cedar chest at the foot of his cot and proceeded to unroll the leather strappings. The cover opened easily, and he gazed down at the leather scrolls. Finally, he reached inside and touched the leather. It gave under his fingers as if it were alive, and he hurriedly withdrew his hand, just touching it almost like it was alive. And he arose and stepped toward the latest window, and through which sounded poured from the noisy marketplace nearly half a mile distant. So here he is, in his inn, in the privacy with himself, and everything he'd ever dreamed of was waiting there in that cedar chest to be applied. You'd think he would be ecstatic. And a lot of us, when we start to hear the things that could help us be successful and make more money, that we get really excited. But Hafid was somewhere else. He was experiencing fear and doubt, and returned again as he looked in the direction of the muffled voices. He felt his confidence waning. He was given the secrets to being the greatest salesman in the world, and his confidence was waning. It's like being given the greatest playbook in sports history for football plays that cannot be defended if you just play it out. And then fear and doubt and lack of confidence. What is this? It's very human. He closed his eyes, leaned his head against the wall, and cried aloud, "How foolish I am to dream that I, a mere camel boy, will one day be acclaimed as the greatest salesman in the world, when I have not even the courage to ride through the stalls of the hawkers in the street. Today mine eyes have witnessed hundreds of salesmen, all far better equipped for their profession than I. All had boldness, enthusiasm, and persistence. All seemed equipped to survive in the jungle of the market. How stupid and presumptuous to think I can compete with and surpass them. Pathros, my Pathros, his mentor, I fear that I will fail you again." He threw himself on his cot, and weary from his travels, he sobbed until he slept. That's reality. See, Hafid wasn't looking at these 10 scrolls, thinking to himself, wow, I'm going to be rich. My life is going to be so amazing when this happens and that happens. No, Hafid fell into a trap that a lot of us do. He fell into fear, fell into doubt, which led to comparison. Which, when we get into comparison, what our mind is actually doing is it's finding some area of our life, some lane that we might want to play in or pursue, and it seeks out in its closest resources someone who seems elite, exceptional in that, and then isolates what they are exceptional at and compares that isolated trait to all of us, all of who we think we are. And all of us includes faults and troubles and challenges and tragedies and all the bad stuff as well as all the good stuff. But now we've got an isolated, exceptional, superior trait that we were trying to compare apples to apples to ourselves, and that's just not fair. And Hafid fell right into that trap. Fear crept in, doubt crept in. He hadn't but traveled a day or two from Pathros and had already lost faith in what was possible, even though he had just spent time with his mentor, the greatest salesman in the world, seeing what happens when you apply the gifts of these secrets that he had now been given, and he was scared to death, sobbing. But I think there's some beauty to this. I think Hafid knew what it was going to take. Not in terms of tasks, because that's easily taught. There are plenty of people that will teach you what to do to make a lot of money, what to do to be more successful, what to do to have a better relationship, but that's the behavioral dimension. And if that's all Hafid was thinking about, I don't think there would have been any reason to fear and doubt, just follow the instructions. But he knew that the scrolls would require much more than just simple instructions. It would require him to challenge his own identity, to challenge his own limiting beliefs. Because here he was bold enough to go track down the greatest salesman in the world. That was a bold move. As a camel boy, low in status, to go there and say, I want to learn from you for whatever reason, to be that ambitious, amazing. But then finally given the way to rocket launch his life. And he's frozen with fear, frozen with doubt. I want to believe it's because he had some sense of what it would require of him. And many of us face that resistance, face that fear, and use it as a sign to turn back. Part of that is because the way we're biologically wired, because our our brain wants to keep us safe, which actually means it wants to keep us predictable. And so we play out in our minds that success and fulfillment is just this blaze of glory and excitement and enthusiasm. He went through all the traits that so many other salesmen on the streets that he passed were so much better than he was. But those weren't the keys to success. That isn't what would be required of him. The first thing that would be required would to learn the secrets of learning. How do you actually learn? And what are you learning for? As Og goes on to share in the first scroll, that learning is not about strategy. Learning is not about these secret moves that nobody knows about, the ninjas of success. No, Og made it very clear that the secret to learning is to prevent failure. And the repetition that goes with that, the principles that go with that. But the theme of scroll 1, as he said, was to not create success. The first scroll lays out clearly, the first thing you do is not create success. The first thing you do is prevent failure. Which doesn't sound super exciting, especially in today's day and age where we need the new sizzle and the new amazing, sexy, awesome ways of being able to create success, and look at my Lambo and look at my jet and look at all this stuff that you want too, and you're only going to have if you buy my program, and all of it. Just, it's not going to work if you don't have a foundation. It's not going to work if you don't know how to prevent failure. But that's a hard sell. That's hard to say, hey, I know you want to make $1 million a year online, but that's going to be you making $1 million online. And if you, who you are on every level, does not know how to prevent failure, it doesn't matter what you build, okay? If you've got this foundation, okay, and you're trying to build your success, okay, whatever that might look like, here's my elementary school house, okay? Whatever that is, if this is a shaky foundation, this will fall every time. It doesn't matter how architecturally sound the strategy is, what you do is, what you feel is. It doesn't matter if you don't change the way you think. Doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter how you feel about what you do, it will all be short term without being able to prevent failure, which has everything to do with becoming aware of how you think and creating habits that can support what you want to do and what you want to feel consistently. Not constantly. This is not an all or nothing proposition, but consistently. This is the great secret at the very beginning of the scrolls that gets brushed over all the time. Prevent failure. Learn how to learn. Learn how to love. Learn how to persist. Realize how valuable you are. Realize how valuable time is. Realize how crazy emotions are. Utilize the power of laughter. Multiply your value, not necessarily your effort or your time. Multiply your value. Act now, and always seek for support from higher powers. That's the foundation for preventing failure. That's the reason for the scrolls. And I think Hafid had known, spending enough time with Pathros, that was going to require everything. It would require everything to be able to create a foundation that could prevent failure. Many of us are withholding something, a lot of things, hoping that we can create massive success with what we leave out there for the rest of the world. But it's time to reveal all of ourselves. A book I'm reading right now, the author is a clinical psychologist, said something so beautiful. He said, if we can't reveal ourselves to others, we'll never be able to reveal ourselves to ourselves. And revealing ourselves is how we find our real, genuine, and authentic selves. It's where we dive into our thinking patterns that create our reality, our habits that create our existence and our results and our actions, to be able to create a foundation for failure prevention. But also understanding that we are human beings, and we will want to pursue things to experience them, because that experience prepares us for where it's going to take us and prepares us to serve others along the way. Okay? We are designed as human beings, as our culture, as our community, to not just improve ourselves, but improve ourselves because it improves other people around us. We want you to become the best version, the best failure-preventing version of you possible for you, but more importantly, for everyone that deserves the best version of you to show up around you. And you do that by learning how to learn and being able to make an impact on what really matters long term. If what you do and what you feel becomes a result of how you think, it can be sustained. But if what you do and what you feel is contrary or out of alignment with what you think, which is a lot of people, we measure it scientifically in the Habit Finder, you go in and take that and you can actually see across 6 specific areas and 6 dimensions in each of those areas which ones are in alignment with what you're trying to build up here and which ones are sabotaging what you're trying to build up here. We can actually now scientifically and mathematically measure this down here. What Og was talking about with threaten to imprison our future, to be able to prevent failure. But let us not forget the fear that comes with the realization of challenging our own biology. That's kind of what Hafid was running into in this inn, where he's got the secrets right at his feet. And it's fear and doubt and sobbing to the point that he can't even open it and read the first one. Even massive curiosity wasn't enough. But I think it's because he knew what it would take. That he knew that it was a long-term game. That he knew it was no longer about tracking down Pathros, finding out some secrets that he didn't know before, implementing them and becoming a wild success quickly. Okay? We want you to become as successful as possible as fast as you can, but not quicker than you should. And being able to prevent failure is what gives you that balance, what helps you understand how to do that. So how do you prevent failure? Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is create awareness. You cannot prevent failure without awareness. If you are not aware of which thought processes are driving you towards where you want to go and which thought processes are distracting you from where you want to go, and then the principles of actually being able to shift those, then you're always playing with limited ability. You're always going to be handicapped. You can run pretty far that direction, but eventually that bungee cord of unhealthy habits of thinking that are not supporting you are going to yank you right back until you understand the principles of being able to change your position, to be able to change your habits of thinking. But fear is going to be a part of this process. Fear is a part of growth. Resistance is a part of growth. Work with a lot of clients who tell me that they're afraid of failure. They're afraid of rejection, which is interesting because generally, like, if there's something, I'm afraid of clowns in haunted houses, so I don't go to haunted houses that have clowns in them. So it's interesting that a lot of the people that tell me they're afraid of failure and afraid of rejection, that's a pretty consistent theme in their life. That they're experiencing consistent rejection and consistent failure that they thought they were afraid of. And yet we're biologically wired to run away from or fight what we're afraid of. So if you were really afraid of failure, okay, Hafid wasn't afraid of failing. I think he was a little bit afraid of what it would require, who he would need to become. Here's one of the challenges in doing that, okay, is that the brain, okay, let me see if I can map this out for you for it to make as simple a sense as possible, okay? Here's you right now, okay? This is your capacity, okay, and your current ability. Now, what's the problem is you want to create these kinds of results. So let's compare this to running a marathon, for example, because that's a really simple one for us to get an idea, a great analogy for personal growth. We want to run a marathon, and here we're on the couch, okay, and here is the marathon that we're going to run. The challenge is we go and run 1 mile, okay, with our current ability and our current capacity, and your brain freaks out about this deficit. Wow, really had to push myself hard to be able to run that mile. And yet I'm supposed to run 26.2 of them when we get to the end of this? Are you kidding me? How am I supposed to be able to pull that off? And so this deficit, what it eventually does is now your brain thinks about the next mile and 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 the next mile at your current capacity. So this is your current capacity. And so when your brain looks into the future, it considers having to do all this, but with your current ability, seeing the deficit getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and in your mind, meaning it's getting harder and harder and harder. This is what Hafid was feeling. This is what many of you who have actually considered what it would really take, have actually explored what you're afraid you would have to change about your life, what you're afraid you would have to become to create the success you really want. Those of you who have been bold enough to actually do that. This is what we're facing. Is we're facing a brain who considers the fact that we are only at this level of ability, but we are required to do these things, and just sees it getting harder and harder and more impossible. But we know that's not the truth. We know that if we run this mile, that our capacity will improve. And if we run the next one, our capacity will improve. And the idea is for the capacity to be able to grow along with what is required. Now, what is required should always be a little bit ahead of what our current capacity is. That's how we get stronger. Okay, I can run a mile in 10 minutes, no problem. So I should probably try and run a mile in 9 minutes or 9.5 minutes or whatever it is. I ran 2 miles, no problem. Let's see if we can run 3 the next week. And there's prescribed plans for doing this. Those of you who have ever run a marathon know that there's very specific thresholds, okay, and capacity, but it's always about getting stronger, okay, getting your endurance up, but keeping what is required of you just a little bit of ahead of that at all times, because this deficit is important. It's what gets you stronger. But when that gets overdone, that's when we bail and we quit. And then we quit and we feel relieved that we quit. And so if we quit because of all the noise, we quit because of all the mess, and we feel relieved, one of the number one challenges is we assume that that relief is a sign that we shouldn't have been doing it in the first place. And that's tragic. That's tragic when we think that we shouldn't have been doing that in the first place, and so we take our relief, which is not peace, it's counterfeit peace. We take our relief as a sign that I shouldn't have been doing that business, and I shouldn't need to pursue that career, or I shouldn't need to get that promotion, and we settle. And some of us don't even get that far. Some of us just succumb to the brain mapping out the next 2 years of our life, the next 20 years of our life based on our current capacity. And this just getting more and more difficult. Of course, we're not going to start a journey that our brain has us convinced is just going to get harder and harder and harder and harder until we break. So understand that your brain is trying to process. The reason you feel fear, the reason it's actually a fear of success rather than a fear of failure, is because if we're successful and we pull this off, look at how hard our life is now. Current capacity is down here. We're required to perform here. That's impossible to sustain. How can we possibly do that? That's the way the brain processes, one-dimensionally. Because it can only think about doing that marathon based on how you can currently perform. The base part of your brain. But the more enlightened, more inspiring, more future-focused part of your brain, if you're willing to use it intentionally, can see that when you do this, you get a little bit better. And you do this, and you get a little bit better. Do this, and you get a little bit better, and a little bit better. So when you actually come time to do this, you're actually here. And you still have a reasonable deficit that you can actually overcome. But this is why the brain deploys so many things to keep you predictable. Because it thinks that this has to stay the same, which means that this needs to stay the same. And then we settle, we play small, and we don't create success. This is the resistance you feel when it comes time to create the success that you want in life. You are feeling an illusion. This is an illusion that your brain is creating because some of its strongest, most influential parts on your behavior does not have the capacity to be able to see anything but what you can currently do. It can only see that you can only currently walk a mile. You can't jog a mile. So then it thinks about that capacity times 26.2. It's going to be impossible to train for a marathon. But if we'll stay at it, because we've seen enough people do it, we actually know that that's not the case. That if you can walk a mile today, but you stay at a consistent progression, properly laid out and given in the proper steps and the proper speed and progressions, that you're not going to be here forever. You can get up to here. But remember, the brain mapped out the next 2 years of your life, the next 6 months of your training, as your current capacity, wanting you to quit because it's going, there's no way we can run 26.2 miles in a year or in 6 months. We can only walk half a mile right now. So then we move into the concept the concept of the fact that we get a little bit better, but the concept and the experience are still two totally different things. All you need to remember about this is where fear comes from. Fear is an illusion, okay? We've all heard fear, okay? False evidence appearing, not my best handwriting, appearing real. False evidence. The very premise of fear is an illusion. Meaning as soon as you think you're afraid of something, that's not what you're afraid of. Which is why we want to learn how to turn up our radar for resistance. Resistance is often where we'll find what we're really afraid of hiding behind. What we're really trying to avoid. But it's just turned into some resistance, and then we turned it into a fear to distract from what we're actually resisting. So there's what I'm afraid of, like I'm afraid of failure. You're not actually afraid of failure. You're resistant to success because of the consistency required, because of the patience required, because of all the things that your brain doesn't want to have to endure when it could just keep your life the same. And so what you're actually afraid of is success. Remember, fear is false evidence. So it's got you distracted by thinking you're afraid of failure when you're actually afraid of success. Like you may think you're afraid of talking to people. You're not afraid of talking to people. You're afraid that the dialogue you've got inside your head will get exposed to somebody else and they'll find you out. You're not afraid of talking to people. You're afraid of other people finding out what you talk about yourself to yourself. As an example. That's just one example. There's tons of different paradigms, but we'll want to lean into the resistance to discover the source of what we think are our fears. And as we start to do that, now we're starting to create the awareness that can get us into failure prevention. And failure prevention requires a word that I love, that Yoda doesn't necessarily appreciate, but out of context. Try. Once we create awareness, then we create the habit of trying. We're willing to try, willing to at least experience, and experience intentionally. Those two things, becoming more aware and being willing to try, can be huge game changers in building this foundation for prevention of failure, rather than continuing to build these elaborate constructs of success that don't seem to last or don't seem to feel as good as we thought they would, or we don't ever get beyond the blueprints in our heads. So, I would invite you to consider some of these lessons, to consider the impact fear has, to consider the fact that even if you were given everything you wanted to be able to be successful, you might not react the way you think you would when you understand the depth and the gravity of what will be required of you. But also, if you're looking for those principles, you're looking for that measurement, you're looking for how you will actually be able to pull this off. Just as those who want to be able to run a marathon 6 months from now or a year from now will want to follow a very specific program that will get you there. That doesn't just address what you should do, but how you should recover and how you should take care of yourself, what you need to understand about your physiology and your diet and everything else to be able to pull that off. Habit Finder is that for your thinking, so that you can actually change the way you think, which, as James Allen wrote, when you change the way you think, you will be in awe of the radical transformations of the material conditions of your life. It is a domino effect. But be willing to embrace the fear, because it teaches you. And be willing to prevent failure, because then it allows you to find joy in the journey and be able to apply that joy, that energy, that inspiration to any journey to create any success. Rather than chasing all these trapdoors to success, let's prevent failure by creating a solid foundation so that whatever you're doing currently, whatever you're going to do in the future, you can find success, creation, inspiration, passion, and fulfillment and peace. Thanks so much for being on today. Thanks for allowing us to dive into the scrolls a little bit. Amazing lessons. If you do nothing else after today but read The Greatest Salesman in the World and make that a regular part of your life, awesome. If you're ready to create an even greater trajectory, really change the outcome of your life, in your business, in your relationships, in your health and vitality, then take the Habit Finder. Give us an opportunity to dive into your measurements and help see what's going on under the surface, rather than continuing to run into that perpetual glass wall that has bloodied so many foreheads. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy, for what you want to do in this life. I know that you're a creator. I know that you're an entrepreneur or a business leader. And I thank you for that. I thank you for not being willing to settle, to not being willing to play it small, but to be able to push the boundaries. And we would want nothing more than to be able to do this with you, because nobody gets where they want to go alone. And thank you for spending time with us today. I hope it helps. I hope you can find one little simple thing from today to implement into what you're doing and give us an opportunity to take this further with you. Take care. Bye-bye.